morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for today's glimpse into the future, or is it more of a glimpse into what's happening right now? I'm Nikki Jovicic from LookUpStrata, and I'm also the Managing Director of Tower Body Corporate, a body corporate management company in Queensland. I'm your host, and we have with us today Damien Healy, tech guru, and we also welcome back Will Marquand from Tower Body Corporate. Now, ChatGPT has created lots of noise in the media, and there's been many news stories about how AI will replace your job. That seems to have been refined more recently into something along the lines of people are not being replaced by AI, but by humans using AI. So is ChatGPT a fad, or is it something that's too good to ignore? Do AIs like ChatGPT or large language models have a place in your daily work life? And if the answer is yes, what does that really look like? I'm sorry to say, I don't think utilising ChatGPT or something like it is a set and forget. It's more like hiring an intern to assist you with your day. And one article I read mentioned a medical professional embracing AI technology by using it for tasks such as writing up-to-date information leaflets for newly diagnosed patients. Before we begin, we'd like to mention that the information in this session, including the discussions arising from submitted questions and the chat conversation, is not legal advice and should not be relied upon as legal advice, and you should seek independent advice before acting on the information contained in the session. So we welcome Damien Healy today. Damien is a futurist and technologist at heart and a senior ad industry executive by day. He's an Australian who has spent 17 years in London working in roles like Global Digital Operations Officer for a global ad agency. Damien is delighted by technology of all types and has spent countless hours diving deep into technology generally and particularly AI. He's professionally certified in robotics process automation and completed specific training in artificial intelligence and neural networks, and is a regular public commentator on the latest in AI technology. He was recently profiled in an Australian Financial Review article discussing workforce retraining and AI learning. He spent time with many organisations thinking about how AI might impact their businesses and their people, and this has included a look into what AI might mean for Strata as an enabling tool now and how it might impact the industry over the longer term. And we're delighted to welcome back Will Marquand. Will joined the Tower Body Corporate team as a General Manager and Senior Strata Manager in 2020. A licensed Strata Manager, he has widespread experience across all forms of commercial, industrial and residential schemes. A former journalist and teacher, Will is also a regular contributor to the LookUpStrata website as both a writer and podcast figure. He believes in proactive, ethical strata management and hopes to provide Tower's customers with the knowledge and support required to take their schemes forward into the next generation of body corporate management. So we welcome both of you, Will and Damien, for joining me today, and it should be a really interesting session.
Thanks for having us.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. So I think, a lot of people have joined, and I think a lot of you are really not sure what AI even is in the first place. I think a lot of you certainly haven't used ChatGPT. Maybe some of you have. As we said during the intro, I've done a fair bit of work, drilling into AI, because I do see that it's really going to revolutionize the way that we work and we think, and how the tools and systems that we use work as well. So just, an example in, Microsoft's latest big global conference, they just kept talking about AI, and they have a big partnership with OpenAI. And the point is that they're going to be putting artificial intelligence tools across the whole of the Office suite. So, if you're using Office today, in a few months, it's going to look very different because there's going to be AI in everything. And even, today, as you're just living your daily life, you're actually interacting with AI all the time. So as you're, using a streaming platform, you're picking the next video that you're going to watch, that's AI. If you're applying for insurance, they'll use AI models to basically judge your risk profile. So, AI is everywhere. Now, if I just kind of step back from that a little bit, that's why we're here, because AI is everywhere and it will impact everything. But if I take a little bit of a step back and talk about what AI is as well. So AI is actually a pretty broad term that covers robotics and computer vision, natural language processing, as well as machine learning. So quite often when we're talking about AI, and particularly ChatGPT, it's that machine learning piece that we're talking about. But actually AI is a much broader subject. And I think as we get to talking about how it impacts Strata, there'll be some things that are not just about ChatGPT. It's also about how you might be able to use, videos of your properties, for instance, to influence preventative maintenance through insurance and etc. Now, the big thing about machine learning, and I guess what's a little bit different now, is that rather than training computers how to do things using rules, which is how it kind of started initially, there was a moment in time where computers first beat the chess grandmasters, for instance. And that was Deep Blue and Deep Mind from IBM. And that was all about basically brute forcing this game of chess. So you put a bunch of rules into the platform, and basically it would try and predict every possible move, 10 moves out, and it would basically predict the best way path through. That's not what AI is about anymore. And that machine learning piece is something fundamentally different. You can wind right back to the 1940s, actually, and 1950s, where people first came up with this idea of creating computers that operate more like people and learn more like people. So instead of using those rules like they did to beat the chess grandmasters, actually you're creating computers that have things within them that look a little bit like neurons in the brain, and you basically feed these computers with a bunch of information, and those computers will reconfigure themselves and learn based on the information that they're given. And that's really the big difference that's happened in AI over time. Now, the reason why we're here is that, ChatGPT's come out. So I think I've kind of spoken about what AI is, and the fact that the reality is you're interacting with AI every day. You're in your Google Photos, you type, I want my beach photos. That's AI that pulls all of those things up. But the big difference that's happened recently, and why it's on the tip of everyone's lips, is that ChatGPT came out. So that came from a company called OpenAI, and there's actually lots of companies out there that have been working on models like this, and ChatGPT and OpenAI is not the only one. But it's really blown the door off AI, and it's been covered everywhere. And I think the main reason for that is that finally AI is able to speak. So previously, in your video recommendations on your streaming platforms and your insurance predictions and things like that, AIs were basically processing data, but they were not really speaking to you. I don't know what everyone's experiences with chatbots have been previously, but honestly, they've been pretty rubbish. I've been very underwhelmed. And there's only been a couple of kind of magic moments in my life in technology. One was, I remember, when Skype could first do a real-time translation between people in two different languages, and they didn't even need to share the same language. They were like real-time translations. Like, wow, that's really meaningful. There's something really special going on there. And that was actually driven by AI itself. So now, of course, we have ChatGPT, and that was my second magic moment. So I remember going to ChatGPT and like, oh, here's another AI chatbot, there's a lot of noise about it. But I went in there and actually used the thing, and it was just remarkable. It was remarkable in its ability to communicate with me and to kind of understand what I was talking about. And, I love its ability to create creative stories. And, I sat down with my son and we kind of had it make a story for us about, traveling to the moon and, having fun on the moon together and whatever. I mean, it's just really incredible. Well, what it is basically a probability model at this point in time. So this kind of comes to some of the potential restrictions. It doesn't actually understand language at all, strangely enough, although it looks like it does. It's all mathematics and code in the background. But it's basically learnt across the entirety of the internet. Right, so it's downloaded every text that's ever been published on the internet, read every book that's out there. So it understands the pattern of language. And it's really interesting once you do that at scale that suddenly it can communicate really effectively because it understands how people talk and how words are put together. And so that's where this kind of incredible power comes from. But then equally, that leads us to some of the restrictions that, as we get into talking about how to use it, there's some restrictions. So being a probability model, it has a tendency to hallucinate. So it will make stuff up. And when we get into use cases, one use case we're saying we won't do is around regulation, right? So we're not going to go into ChatGPT and ask it to advise us on the latest regulation, because it's just not there yet. There's really a famous story that came up around a lawyer in the US who decided to make his court papers in ChatGPT. And it came out beautifully. It was nicely formatted. The language was amazing. It had all these amazing cases referenced, and gave it to the judge. And the judge realized that all these cases were made up. So that's one of the big kind of risks that you have around ChatGPT. So, I mean, it is incredible, and it's suddenly broken apart this challenge that AI has always had, in that it's not really able to communicate with you. Now, if you look at the jobs market, there's some research recently, I think from the World Economic Forum or Accenture, where they talk about 60% of people's work is to do with natural language. So it's talking and it's emailing. So, and how we go through our lives, most of what we do is talking to each other, right? So suddenly AI is able to enter that world, and that's really where the magic has come from. I think why it's kind of blowing the doors off everything. And that leads us to where we are today. And I guess we're going to talk a little bit about how AI may impact Strata, etc. But maybe, Will, do you have any thoughts following that intro?
So if we're talking about the world of work, how are we already starting to see people using it in real life scenarios?
Well, there's a lot of automation. So taking large language models out for a moment. So ChatGPT is in this class of things called large language models. So taking that out for a moment, automation, so the broader AI, automation is everywhere. And so there's been a lot of work and talk about this over time, for a long time. I mean, self-driving cars are going to disrupt truck driving, for instance. If you're a truck driver, you need to be very worried. In factories manufacturing cars and manufacturing iPhones, the percentage of people versus machines has flipped dramatically. So there's so much more work being done by machines now. And actually, the World Economic Forum has this kind of sliding bar in terms of the amount of work being done by machines versus people. Now, in your day-to-day, in terms of emailing people back and forth, some of your tools may have some AI built into them. So your spam filter, for instance, in your email probably is using some AI within it. But in terms of the large language models, so ChatGPT style capabilities, you haven't really seen them yet, unless you're kind of purposefully going in and doing it, which is exactly what we're going to do in this session today. And I would say that in the very near future, you're going to see these tools turning up everywhere. So if you're a creative designer, a bunch of new AI capabilities have already landed in Photoshop. If you're someone who's using Slack, there's now a bunch of AI capabilities in Slack to go and summarize all your conversations. You'll suddenly find that it will turn up in Microsoft Outlook, and it will start helping you to write your emails. That will happen. If you use Gmail at the moment, when it's predicting or giving you suggestions about what the next bit of your sentence will be, then that's AI too. So that's kind of how it's materializing, I think, in the world at the moment. But
okay. And if we're thinking about Strata specifically, obviously, Strata management and the industry as a whole, it's really based around communication. Managers spend all day speaking to people on the telephone, sending out emails by the hundreds and thousands every day and every month. And then they're having meetings and recording those meetings and recording the results of that. Do you think that there's applications there for the world of Strata?
Yeah, I think there certainly are, and you'd need to be really careful at this point in time. So, you and I have obviously spent a little bit of time thinking about a couple of applications that are potentially relevant today. Right now, as I said, using large language models is not appropriate for anything to do with regulation, for instance. And you need to be really, really careful in terms of data privacy. when I look at the Strata Manager role, we've kind of discussed it. There is a lot of communication, but it's really a kind of very multidisciplinary, really, because you're working with insurance companies, and then you're on site, then you're in the office, and then you're doing emails, you're doing phone calls, and you're running meetings, and like there's so much in there that it's very difficult to imagine that an AI is going to replace a Strata Manager per se. But there's a lot of roles like this where there's kind of percentages of roles that will be replaced. And there's kind of a famous quote that says that, generally speaking, probably your role is not going to be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by someone using AI if you're not. Right? That's how you need to think about it. So there is all this communication aspect. The models are not yet sufficiently great to take over all of that communication because they don't have enough nuance and knowledge. But whenever I think about AI and the application of AI to roles and to businesses, you have to think about what happens when AI is 10x better, because it is what we call an exponential technology. And so let's just say that you can expect it to get twice as good every 2 years. So, within a few years, it's going to be 10x better. So when it's 10x better, and it's specifically trained on strata regulation, then what happens? So in the future, a few years down the track, I imagine that someone will have trained these large language models on strata and will be able to pick up a lot more of that communication stuff. And I would even argue probably pick up some of the regulation stuff as well, because it will be structured in such a way that it's done safely and appropriately. But for now, as we've kind of discussed, there's a couple of things we can do already.
Yeah, okay. So obviously some people are resistant. I mean, is the message for them sort of resistance is futile, really?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of blogged about this, and I've been talking about businesses more than people, to be honest. But for every business, there's all these different kinds of approaches. There's some that are just head in the sand, and they're like, there's stuff happening that's interesting, I'm not going to do anything about it. Some people that say there's stuff happening, but we're probably good. Or there's some people that say there's stuff happening, I need to understand what it is and understand what it means for my business. And I absolutely say that whether you're a business or a person, you need to be in the latter camp.
Yeah,
this is not going away. It's going to be, as I said, 10x better in a few years, and then 10x better a few years after that. So it is going to impact you. You need to just figure out what your life is going to look like in the context of the future. I mean, that's what you need to think about. So there is no good answer, in my opinion, my humble opinion, whereby you sit by and just say, it's not relevant to me, I'm not going to do anything. So, I'm a huge proponent of saying, well, you dial into a Strata meeting that says, what the hell's this ChatGPT thing, and how do we use it in Strata? That's a good start. But, get your hands on with the tools, have a play around with it. You do need to understand the safety and privacy elements, which we'll touch on as we go through our demos and things, but you need to get in there. You need to start using it. The other thing, the kind of mental trick that I recommend to both businesses and people is, as you're working with it, don't think necessarily about what it can do today. I mean, that's fine. But again, you need to think about what it means when this thing's 10x better. And you kind of cast yourself into the future. It's not everyone's able to do it, or maybe it's not natural for a lot of people, but that's kind of the leap that you need to take.
Okay. So you say you need to get in there. Let's do it. Let's have a look at what it is, and we'll try an experiment. So for everyone out there, just so you know, I'm very much the beginner here. Damien's the expert. If you don't know what it is, you don't quite know what you're talking about. Well, neither do I, really. I've been talking to Damien a lot over the last few weeks. I've gained some knowledge from that. A lot of people here are just starting out, and then that's what we really wanted to show you is, if you're just starting out, well, how can you get going? How can you start exploring these tools for the purposes of your work? I'm just going to share out my screen here.
I might just say, Will, while you're doing that, we have had a couple of comments come in. There's somebody in here that's actually using AI to record the session and take minutes on it. And then we had another comment from Jason saying that he had a 1,100 word email that came in from an owner, and he used ChatGPT to put it into 10 key dot points and save so much time. So it's really great to see that people are using it out there.
Yeah, and that summarization is really great use case. And I mean, we'll touch on meeting minutes. So yeah, it's interesting that the person out there is using a tool to create the meeting minutes. It's a really obvious thing to for a technology to do. It doesn't seem to be yet built into a lot of the, Microsoft Teams, etc., or Zoom. Like, I don't think Zoom does it naturally. But there's so much innovation, particularly in the open source space. There's so much innovation out there that, inevitably most of these things are actually being tackled by someone, and it's just not mainstream yet. But yeah, I think built-in capabilities to take meeting minutes, it's a no-brainer to go into Zoom and Microsoft Teams and stuff. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, so I've shared my screen. Nikki, can you see that one?
Yes, yeah, that looks good, Will.
Okay, so this is ChatGPT. Anyone can access it. You just go online, you create an account, and when you do, you get a page that looks something like this. There's ChatGPT 3.5, which is the free version. ChatGPT 4 is a paid version. Damien, is there any particular differences? Is it?
Yeah, fundamentally, ChatGPT 4 is smarter, is basically what it comes down to. It's also a bit slower, so it's using a lot more information, and it's kind of, let's say, thinking a lot more than ChatGPT 3.5. So ChatGPT 3.5 is kind of the fast, broad brush version, and ChatGPT 4 is a lot more thoughtful, let's say. That's really simple terms. So the paid version, I have the paid version. You have to pay in US dollars, it gets translated, but I think it's about 33 Aussie, I think, a month. So, you can make up your own mind about how expensive you think that is, but it seems very reasonable for the capability that you get. And there are some restrictions on just the amount of work that you can put into ChatGPT 4, but I think it should be more than enough for most people for $33.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a fairly basic interface. I think it's important, there's a column on the right there that says limitations may occasionally generate incorrect information. That's the important phrase there, isn't it? We shouldn't, as we're going through this process, we shouldn't be thinking about the results that we get back as the end game, the final answer necessarily, but more as something to help us along the way. What we're going to do is we're going to try to write a basic body corporate letter. In this case, we're going to be making a complaint about a dog. So a breach of bylaw letter to an owner about a noisy dog. And I'm in Queensland, so I'm going to use the Queensland-based legislation to do this. And in ChatGPT, I'm going to see at the bottom here, I'm going to send a message to the machine to ask it to create a letter for me. So I'm going to put in Queensland body corporate. Right, breach. Okay, so this is very much my beginner's assumption. What am I doing? I've given the AI some instructions. I've told them it's about Queensland body corporate, and I've told it what I want, which is write a breach of bylaw letter regarding a noisy dog. Let's see what comes up. There we go. Took a couple of seconds. As you can see, it's we've got a letter format, and I won't read out the whole letter, but it's just reading this through and having done previous experimentation, it's reasonably okay. It's in a letter structure. It addresses the person we're speaking to politely. It raises what the situation is fairly accurately. It says it's come to our attention that there have been consistent and ongoing noise disturbances caused by your dog, which is a violation of the bylaws outlined in our community guidelines. Sounds fairly accurate. And then it says in the second paragraph there, it says according to bylaw XX and section YY. So if you were copying and pasting this, you could probably copy and paste some of that information. And then it asks that the owner addresses the matter with immediate effect, and it also offers some sympathy, which might not come from all body corporate managers, saying that they understand that pets are an integral part of the community, and you're fairly confident that the owner will rectify the situation. It's not a bad letter. It's kind of 80% of the way there, I would say. And if you're an experienced body corporate manager with a limited amount of time, you could put that in, copy and paste it, make your adjustments, and perhaps what might take you 15 minutes to write a breach of bylaw letter on this subject, perhaps you could cut that down to 5 or 10 minutes. So there's an obvious kind of time gain there. But Damien, I only really put in my basic instructions, and this is the letter I got back. How do you think I could improve that?
Can I just say in the chat, it's interesting because a bunch of people obviously coming up and talking about how they've been using ChatGPT, and I think someone actually mentioned that they'd written all their templated letters in this way. So I think they use ChatGPT presumably to get the structure like this, right? But then they've just kind of made sure that all the regulatory pieces are all accurate. But you know, it sounds like people have actually been going through this specific process. So how you make this better? There's a whole process or discipline called prompt engineering. It's really too deep to go into in a huge amount of detail, but basically ChatGPT, again, being a probability model, it just needs a lot of information to riff off. So it benefits from you just being a little bit more articulate about what you want and how you want it. So you might say, you know, you must include these kinds of things, or you can say, I want to use this kind of language, or I want you to write it as if I'm talking to this kind of person. So when I talk through the other demo as well, I'll touch a little bit more on this, but it's just about giving it more to work with. You can just bang in a sentence like you did. I think even originally when you did this, you didn't put in the Queensland Body Corporate bit at the beginning, and so you would have gotten something else. But by putting Queensland Body Corporate in the beginning, again, that sets up all these computer neurons around this whole concept of Queensland Body Corporate, and it's much more likely to come back with something useful just because you've given a little bit of context. And so, you know, it does generally like a little bit more richness. And the same goes in there's image generation programs out there like Midjourney, and there's tools you can use where you type in a really simple prompt and it'll basically pull out this whole rich description, because that's better for the image generator. And so that would just be my feedback. It likes context. It likes a little bit more detail as to what you want. You can actually also give it a sample of the kind of text that you like, either because you like it because of the type of language or the format. So you can actually also give it like a sample of what you're wanting to get out of it.
Okay, so if I was going to do that live now, what would you tell me to put in to make it better?
Oh, well, show me the prompt again.
So the original prompt was Queensland Body Corporate, write a breach of bylaw letter regarding a noisy dog.
Yeah, I think you probably talk a little bit about the tone that you want, for sure. Mm-hmm. You could say maybe include a reference to the fact that there's been a neighbour complaint or something. So you just try and give it just a little bit of extra information to rip off.
So how do I do that? So it says rewrite this letter. Yeah,
rewrite this letter, including a reference to a neighbour complaint. Write it. I think it is fairly formal already. Is there something we don't like about the tone here? Because it would be good to put something in of like the tone potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tone's pretty good, to be fair. I think it's kind of neutral, but also informative, and also you know, giving a clear direction to the owner.
Yeah,
I think the tone's reasonably correct.
Yeah, well, just go with what you.
Okay, so rewrite this letter, including a reference to the fact that there was a neighbour complaint. Okay, so we put that in. A couple of seconds. Yeah. Okay, and we can see it's essentially the same letter, but we can see that this section here, the neighbour's complaint underscores the urgency of addressing this issue promptly.
Yeah. And something you can do when you're writing these letters or asking ChatGPT to write letters for you, like we just gave it 1 point to include, but you can actually say, listen, I want you to write me a whatever, a 3-page letter or an extensive letter based on these 5 bullet points. So, and then you basically just give it the bullet points, and it will basically expand that out. So the other use cases we had before that was coming up in chat about summarizing things, they have this 11,000 word email or something, and they're summarizing. You can do it the other way around. So to unpack, you say, yeah, I want you to write me a letter about a noisy dog, and I need you to include these 5 bullet points or something along those lines. So you can,
okay. Yeah, so we can see that, from a basic letter writing capacity, there's a lot of, there's a lot of applications there that we can use as managers. And I think what's important is that, as I'm reading this, it's obvious that the letter that's provided is not the final letter that you're going to send out to the owners. It's just that it's written the letter that I could have written much more quickly, and then I can copy and paste that. I can put it on the company's letterhead and stationery, and then I can make the adjustments myself as the manager to make it the correct letter, or make the adjustments on an individual basis depending on the owner, as I understand it.
Now, a few people in chat will have just mentioned if you make it more succinct or with a more professional tone, they just were interested in what changes that would make to the letter if you did that.
Sure. So what would you say, Damien, then? Rewrite this letter?
Yeah. So as you kind of keep tuning the prompt, in future you might write just a more detailed prompt. But ChatGPT does have a sense of context. So yes, you can just keep saying rewrite this letter, and using references to tone or, as I said, the type of person you're trying to talk to are really strong ways of modifying prompts.
Okay, so I'm going to make it more succinct, but using a more casual tone, because we've obviously got a formal tone, so that'll be the one that changes it. Here we go. So this one, the tone is quite casual, probably for a letter from a body corporate manager. But hi, hope all is good. Just a quick heads up. We've received a complaint letter from a neighbor about your dog causing some noise hassles. Figured we'd give you the lowdown. I'm not really sure I would say that personally, but that's, that's okay. And yeah, our community is all about good vibes, and that means keeping things chill for everyone. So this version's probably gone a bit
a little bit scary. But you said casual, but so this is where the specificity is relevant, maybe. So you said casual, and casual can be so broad. Casual to someone who's a hippie or something is very different to a casual for the CEO of some big bank or something. So it's a very kind of broad term. So you could say, for instance, that you write it in a casual manner that's still professional in the context of me writing a letter to a client or something like that. It might just help it to tune things up a little bit.
Yeah, okay. But so it's up to us to experiment and learn the words really that work for what we're intending.
Yeah, and I think Nikki said before that it's not necessarily a fixed thing as well. So actually in the piece that I'll run through, the same prompt one day might give you a different answer to the same prompt a week later, actually, because they're always tuning these things in the background. So it's not really a set and forget thing right now, unfortunately. It's really completely predictable. That's a challenge for, I guess, not only Strata, but you big enterprise corporates, because you're not really 100% sure week by week exactly what it's going to spit out as much as you'd like to. So just be aware of that as well, that you might get the perfect prompt that'll be working one week, and then the next week you might have to tune it up again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's letter writing. That's reasonably straightforward, but we're going to look at something more complex, which is creating meeting minutes. And we can't do this one live, but we created a couple of examples in advance. Damien, are you going to share your screen?
Yes, I will. So I guess just firstly, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess just to explain why we're not doing this live, we did do it live, but being respectful of the data protection of the entities involved in this meeting, it wasn't appropriate for us to do the whole thing live. And so, you do need to really think about your data protection and privacy protection. I think actually there was something that came up in the chat earlier around whether the content you put in a ChatGPT or some of the other language models, whether that might be kind of kept and held and used for future training of that model. So by default, it is. So you have to be really careful. There's a model called Claude, which I actually use for this, which does not by default do that. But if you want to use ChatGPT without it recording what you're doing, you need to go into settings. And in here, you can hear data controls, chat history and training. So you need to be a paid person, which means you get ChatGPT 4, which, based on the letter writing thing, you can get much better quality. It's going to think better. It's going to be more nuanced. It's going to be more capable, right? The 3.5 is quite broad brush. But once you pay, you get ChatGPT 4, and you have the ability to toggle this button, which basically says, ChatGPT, do not take what I've given you and bring it into your corpus of data that you have to train your model. So that's really important if you're doing anything with confidential data. And this is only a few weeks old, this button here. So that's kind of how rapidly these things are moving. Anyway, getting into the demo. So just to set the scene a little bit here. So there was a 1 hour 20 meeting that we were working with. Obviously, we're not talking about the exact entity this belongs to, but it was a long meeting. I actually used the transcript feature in Office 365, but there's lots of different tools that can kind of take a recording and produce a transcript.
Sorry, just to interrupt there, because not everyone will be aware.
Sorry.
If you create an audio file, you can pretty much just turn that into a transcript automatically through Office 365 now, or other tools.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just an option in here in settings where you can basically put up either an audio file or a video file, and it will spit out the transcript.
Yeah, and the transcript, for everything I've seen, is very accurate, really.
Yeah, surprisingly. And again, that actually comes back to AI, because speech recognition was actually really, really poor until they started using neural networks to solve for that, which is that whole kind of flexible machine learning approach that I mentioned earlier. That's really when speech recognition became actually very, very good. All right, and just in here, so it was 13,000 words, 48 pages of transcript. So there was a lot of content there. I don't know how you guys take notes, but if I was trying to take notes for 13,000 words, I'd probably not be all that present in the meeting. And maybe you have ways of doing that. I'm sure you, as professionals, you've figured that out. But with the transcript, first thing I did was just check for safety. So there, in the model that I was using called Claude, it's from a different company called Anthropic. It was only available in the UK and US at the time, but I managed to work around that. But I specifically checked Claude's privacy policy to check that it was not going to basically take the data that I uploaded and bring it into its training data. So again, that's just a really important thing to do. So you can actually upload files into Claude, whereas ChatGPT, I think at the moment you still need to paste the information in. Claude was able to handle this size of information as well, whereas I could not put it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT will end up accepting a lot more information in the prompts in due course. But for right now, actually, Claude was far superior. And Claude, I'm not sure if it's available in Australia yet, but it'll come soon. But this is what I did. So using an interface very much like the one that Will was working on earlier for ChatGPT, it looks pretty much the same. I said, listen, I have a long transcript from the Strata meeting that I've uploaded. So I've uploaded the file. Can you please create minutes for the meeting? Please summarize all of the key discussion items. Also specifically mention each time there is a decision made and the votes for and against that decision, because Will said that was pretty much the most important thing to be capturing. So you'll see here, this was the result that I received. I don't know, Will, do you want to talk about how relevant this is as an output?
Yeah, I mean, this was a regular Strata committee meeting. It went on for an hour and 20 minutes. It went across a whole range of issues. It had people talking over each other in the meeting. There were a couple of little minor disputes, but basically, as a summary of the meeting, this is pretty accurate.
Yeah, great. And the format was all right?
Yeah, I think in terms of the format, this probably isn't how most body corporate managers would present it. But if you were just a manager who wanted a quick summary of that meeting, and then you could, re-present it in the fashion that you wanted, this would give you most of the information that you needed very quickly.
Yeah, great. So, like Will did just earlier, we iterated this a bit. One really fun thing you can do, particularly if you're not sure how to make your prompt better, just ask the AI. It's kind of fun. So I basically said, following receiving that previously, I said, do you have any suggestions to improve the prompt that I gave you? Was there anything in that meeting that was important and was missed in the summary you just created? And so it basically gave me a new prompt, and it suggested that I basically do this instead of the previous prompt that I provided. I've bolded a couple of words in here, but you see that there's just a lot more kind of context. There's more for it to work with. There's a lot more specificity around what you want to get out of it. There's some important words in here. So they said, please create comprehensive minutes. It talks about capturing nuances and important details. In here, it talks about providing exact wording of the motions voted on. Clear chronological order, so you can kind of tell it how to rank things and how to lay things out. So there's really a lot more in this prompt that just helps it to understand a little bit more about what you want. But also, as I said, it's really just a big probability model. So each word you put in kind of fires off different bits of the model, and it just helps it to think a little bit more. Now, back to our earlier point, the same prompt, a couple of weeks later produced something different. So, it is changing all the time. In fact, a basic request for minutes is actually dramatically improved just in the last couple of weeks in Claude. But nonetheless, this is what we received from the new prompt. I mean, it does keep going down, just so you know. But Will, I think you looked at this and you had some thoughts as to its relevance.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was kind of it kind of blew my mind when I saw it, how quickly it was produced, because I know how long it can take managers to produce minutes like this. It's often and what a struggle it can be sometimes for them to get them all organized and together. And yet you were just able to produce this from the transcript in a couple of minutes. And if I was a manager, just being able to do that, it would save me a huge amount of time, because I could then sort of start formatting that in the more traditional manner that we might like. But a lot of the work that I do is already in there. It's recorded who's present, what the times are. It's recorded what the main votes are. So I could take all of that information and then I could put it into, say, my own company's template for how we would like the minutes to be presented. And I think it would be, I think I would save a dramatic amount of time on producing meeting minutes than the amount versus the amount of time it's currently taking me. And if I'm saving that time, it can really change the way that I'm approaching my job. I might be much more open to doing more meetings, and because I know that I can finish the minutes much more quickly for a start. And I'm also happy that when people are kind of having disputes about what happened in the minutes afterwards, if you have this kind of transcript as well, you can say, well, no, this is what you said. This is what you can go back to. So you can resolve maybe some of those issues where people are saying, well, I didn't say that. And you can say, oh, well, actually, this is exactly what you said. And this is exactly what was recorded at the time. So I think from a manager's perspective, this meeting recording function is, hugely exciting and can really change some of the ways that we work. And I'd expect that to sort of start happening quite quickly, within the next 12 months, certainly.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there about, based on having this technology, you might have more meetings, and presumably there's a reason to have more meetings. That's a useful reason, rather than in a lot of companies, just people have meetings for meeting's sake. But it's interesting because there is talk, of course, about, if people are more efficient, and whether it's Strata or something else, if people are more efficient, then, you know, does that mean jobs go away, or you need to pay less for the service or whatever? Quite often what happens is the shape of the work changes. So instead of spending hours and hours doing these minutes, you pick up something really important that you probably should have been doing that you may not have gotten around to because you were doing the minutes. So it's not even necessarily that you know, the overall workload goes away, but you're spending your time in theory more wisely, or more like purposefully on more intelligent things, rather than just, you know, trying to figure out summaries for meetings. So that's kind of part of the power, right?
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? One of the questions that we've had was from Stephen, just asking, can AI take an email to a Strata manager from an owner and turn the text into audio so that the Strata manager can hear it instead of reading it? I guess that's like an accessibility question. Is that something that's readily available, Damien, at the moment?
Yeah, so I don't know off the top of my head, I don't know of a tool set that does that, but I'm sure there will be something out there, and it feels like it will be a feature for sure of some kind of future office capability, I imagine. But I've not searched for that specific feature, but I would be surprised if there were not something like that already available, because all of the tech is there, right? So your system's already downloading the email. Your system, there's plenty of capability now to read the email. There's plenty of capability to put that into an audio file. So, you know, all of the pieces are there. You know, even, I mean, the ability to create language and audio in different languages is kind of off the charts at this point. I saw some technology just recently where you could actually pick any video on YouTube and basically point the AI at it, and basically it would pick it up and rebuild the audio in whatever series of languages you want, and would adjust the lip sync as well. So all of a sudden you create something in one language and it's translated into 10 languages and it's lip syncing. So suddenly you're sitting there and you're speaking Arabic, and it's just incredible. So, you know, it's just an example of the kind of power that's there. And so all of the pieces necessary for that use case are in place. I just don't know of the specific technology that does that today, but I expect that there is something out there.
And we're getting quite a lot of questions, obviously, about privacy concerns. And, you know, Damien, I don't think you're not a sort of privacy expert per se, but where do you think, are there privacy concerns with us recording data like this and putting it into the machines?
Yeah, so down here I actually wrote some thoughts, and one thing actually here was that you should ask that the meeting can be recorded. I did actually do just some specific reading up on Strata and basically whether you have the right to record the meetings or not. And it wasn't really clear, to be honest, but it definitely was very clear that the best practice would be to get consent. So I think you should basically make sure that you do get that consent to record the meeting. There's some other stuff in there just about you know, speaking clearly, etc. But in relation to privacy directly, so ask the meeting that can be recorded, because it's kind of sensitive and personal information. The other piece that really stands out, comes up all the time, is this habit of the large language models to take your prompts and use that for their own learning. So that's really the big one to look out for. So again, in ChatGPT, you need to use the paid version, so you can tell it not to do that. In some other large language models, you need to be basically looking at the privacy policy and checking whether your prompts would be potentially taken into learning. And unfortunately, the terms and conditions can change sometimes. So you might be prompted with a new set of terms and conditions. And this is kind of brand new. I've not really looked into it in depth, but just yesterday there was a bunch of uproar because Zoom had changed their terms and conditions and had basically been asking people to accept terms that said that Zoom would kind of have rights to use all of the kind of recordings and data from people's Zoom calls. Now, I think that would require you to actually accept the new terms and conditions, but they're probably wanting that in order to train future large language models, actually. So you do need to just be a bit careful of the terms and conditions. I'm fairly new back to Australia, so I'm not as familiar with the just general data privacy regulations. but they in Europe there were specific laws around where data couldn't be transmitted. Now, as far as I understand, that's not really an issue here, but you were not allowed, just generally speaking, you were not allowed to have UK personally identifiable information being accessed in China, for instance, without some specific, I guess, approvals and coverage for that use case. So I don't know that that's relevant in Australia, but you need to just kind of understand your obligations under the regulation that you work with. But just on a day-to-day basis, I think get your consent for any recordings or capturing of the data. Make sure when you're using these models that the privacy conditions are such that your data is not going to be used beyond the context that you're using it for.
Yeah,
just the two
I can imagine we get to the stage fairly soon where there's some kind of waiver that gets agreed at the start of meetings, or that gets written into body corporate managers contract that permits meetings to be recorded and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would make sense. And as I said, over time this is all going to change, right? You need to think 10x ahead, and I don't know who's going to do it, but someone at some point is going to train a specific large language model or AI capability on Strata, and you'll end up with a bunch of additional tools, and those will require some, as you say, waivers or consent or whatever to use. I don't know when it'll happen, but it's kind of inevitable, I would say.
Yeah. One of the questions I've had for you is, what I can imagine happening is at some point we'll have like a more specific Strata bot. So someone has already trained it in the type of language that is used in Strata, in the legislation that is used in Strata. Is that realistic? Is that something that can happen?
Yeah, so I guess that's what I was alluding to just then. So there's lots and lots of use cases, or like everyone wants to do this, right? Because these large language models as they stand are really generic. So there's people like Intel's doing a large language model that's completely based around scientific discovery and molecular biology and whatever, and so it's going to focus on that. There's Google's playing around with something called, I think, MedPalm, which is basically trying to take the corpus of medical data and put that in the hands of medical professionals. Pretty much every company out there right now of a size has lots and lots of internal documentation and FAQs and whatever. So they're all out there trying to get this information and train large language models specifically on their information. Another AI tool I saw recently from an Aussie company, they basically using a large language model just for the communication, but they actually had a tool set that would allow people to handle commercial negotiations with partners, basically through a chatbot. But they're basically putting specific rules on top of the large language models. And then in that big corporate example I gave you, they're basically taking all of their corporate FAQ information and training the bot specifically on that. So it's happening everywhere. The question is who, or if someone will do it specifically for Strata, but the barriers to entry are not terribly high, particularly if you pull out just individual use cases, like you say, well, I really need a bot that I can query around regulation. So someone can pretty much today, if they wanted to, pick up all the regulation and train a bot specifically on the regulation. And they're just really using the language bot to help the communication bit, but all of the information that it would be referring to would be from the specific regulation upon which it's been trained or tuned. So it's very, very reasonable to expect that someone at some point will provide a bot that's specific to Strata, potentially covering, as you said, regulation. It'll understand the formats of letters, the meeting minute format, probably some configuration where you can put in all the address details and details of your own properties as well, because that's obviously important. And then obviously it does become much more powerful, and I would say obviously much more reliable, particularly when it gets into the regulatory side of things. So yeah, I'd say it'll happen.
Yeah, sooner rather than later, I expect.
I just wanted to ask, we had a few questions come through about the hallucinations that happen, and that people were just asking what is it and why would it happen, and what do you need to watch out for, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, it's actually it's a probability model. So it understands patterns of words, and it's learnt that those patterns from the whole glorious internet and every book ever written, all that kind of stuff. So it understands patterns of words. But right now, it's not so good at facts. There's lots of things being done to make it better. But if you ask it to do complex maths, for instance, it's only just now getting to the point where it can start doing those things. But it will basically try to predict what the language should look like, more so than necessarily worrying about whether it's factual or not. It's not a search engine. If you want to go and look up a fact, use a search engine. If you use a large language model, it's going to basically predict what the words potentially should look like based on what you asked it. So that's where the hallucinations come from. So in that case I said earlier around this legal person producing their legal papers, it looked exactly like the right thing, and it had case names and all that kind of stuff because it knew the format that it needed to look like and how you would call out cases and stuff. It just made it up. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Okay, and we've had some people jump in there and say, yeah, they will use it and they'd like to have a look at it. So we just stress that if you do that, make sure you read over what is produced and that you're happy with the content that's coming out. So use it as a base from that point, and then and then go forward from there. So is there anything else before we finish up, Will, that you'd like to add to the session today?
No, I mean, you know, don't think about it as a replacement for your knowledge. Think about it as a multiplier for your knowledge. I think if that's the point you start from, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
Definitely. Yeah, great. Okay, Damien, have you got anything else you'd like to wrap it up before we go?
Get in there and start using it. But like I said, just call to action from my side. You know, again, whenever I talk to a person or a business, I'm always encouraging them to just get out there, start trying it, start learning about it, because it will impact your life. That's just a fact. So it's just better to get ahead of it, in my view.
Excellent. Well, I'd have to agree with that, and hopefully we've presented a bit of a different outlook to a few people than they thought they might have gotten in the session today. We had a bit of a pushback when we sent the initial invite out. We had a few emails that came through that sort of possibly, I would say, weren't very happy with us tackling this topic, but hopefully we've done it in a way that's just presented the possibilities to you and then what you can do with it from there, and it's up to you to go and have a play, and hopefully it will help your life and maybe save a bit of time as well down the track. Okay, well, we might wrap it up there. We're right on the hour, so thank you very much for joining us, both Will and Damien. I know you put a lot of time into this before the actual session, and so I really appreciate that you did that, and you looked into it in such depth, and I hope you had a bit of fun with it as well during that time.
It's fascinating. I mean, Damien, I hope you come back in 6 or 12 months and we'll look at a few more examples, like hopefully a bit more advanced, and you'll tell us what we're doing wrong and tell us what to do next.
It'll keep getting better, no doubt.
And thanks, Will and Damien, for joining me today. If you gained value from this video, please hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're looking for information about parking, strata insurance, defects and more, head over to lookupstrata.com.au or sign up to our free weekly newsletter via the link in the description box below.